In Silicon Valley, Americans are not rich. Chinese in Silicon Valley are rich. In the American national memory, Chinese people's professional characteristics have gone through the process of labors, and then researchers, and now they have reached the new elite class. This process.
So these images are superimposed on each other.
In fact, according to my observation, there is a fourth picture gradually emerging, especially before and after the. This time, there is e-commerce represented, cross-border trade, and even live streaming e-commerce, and real estate investment, and these work related to import and export trade and intermediary. A large number of Chinese engaged in business began to rise gradually in the US. This is what I have observed. It's not shown in the data yet. The image of these Chinese merchants is gradually forming and gradually form for professional images. These professional images, when stacked together, it is the national memory of America. The perception of Chinese professionals is high. Actually, there is another line is worth mentioning. As early as in the 1950s, there was a man named Kwong who seemed to be Chinese, was elected as a federal senator in the US. This should be the earliest recorded Chinese to serve in a federal level institution. But this was the only case. He was silent for decades. Until 1996. Luo Jiahui was elected as the governor of Washington. In a year or two, there were new senators and congressmen at this level emerged. Then, there was state-level congressman one after another. Came out at this level of politicians. That is to say, since the first case in the 1950s to the 1990s, until now, some Chinese Americans have gradually entered politics. Although the number is very disproportionate, because the Chinese in the US are recorded, can be counted. Should be 1.522%. But the representatives with political voice should be at the level of 2000s. The political voice of this ethnicity in the US is still disproportionate, but this is also a good phenomenon because we should understand that it is a multi-ethnic and multicultural integrated country. In China, actually, it's hard for us to imagine Americans will come to China to be politicians. Do you know? On the contrary, if we think Chin Americans in American politics is also a welcome thing, gradually enter the political arena. This is also a picture, although the color is still faint. So you see, I've talked about 5 pictures in total. If an American mentions, when talking about Chinese people, what kind of occupation they do, Americans will superimpose these 5 images to form a new picture. Today, it should be said, the image of Chinese people in the minds of Americans has actually changed a lot. In fact, compared with other ethnic groups in the US, Chinese professional image is not low, although in some literary and artistic works. On TV, there are some funny images, nerds, or poor social skills. Some funny situations in this regard. Of course, we know. They even make fun of their own people. They laugh at everything. But in terms of the actual image, the image of Chinese people in the workplace. I remember 10 years ago when I went to Silicon Valley, I talked to my good friends in Silicon Valley. The ratio of Chinese to Americans, now that I think about it, is really a typical new elite ideology. My friend just said lightly, but proudly told me that in Silicon Valley, Americans are not rich. But Chinese in Silicon Valley are rich. Chinese who stay in Valley have excellent academic qualifications and excellent knowledge and hold important positions with high income. And my friend also thinks that in the US, in fact, most Chinese in the United States live in this way of life. Only in some very old San Francisco or Los Angeles, there are still some old Chinese communities. Live in some who used to be in the laboring state, continue from the past, such Chinese people. But this proportion is rapidly declining, while the proportion of new elites is increasing rapidly. There is one point that I think we should see. Chinese employment in American society has not been widely presented so far, is still narrow. Labor lawyers, accountants, Silicon Valley elites. I think in this era, the United States, the irreversible integration of closely advancing together. In fact, many business people have shown new professional features, yes, can truly integrate Chinese into American society and truly influence American society and historical opportunity. I do see that today's Chinese in American society have become more and more. This is a good friend of mine in Los Angeles. When he first went there, he did everything. Airport pickup, delivering things, and even some catering. Now he is doing a stable, and the income is also very good. What is it? Buy old houses and make some renovations and deal with it and then sell it. Originally, this business was only in the Chinese community. Do you understand? In the Chinese community, Chinese buy houses and then sell them to Chinese. That's probably how it goes. My good friend, when he first entered this industry, he was just a young man, I really can't compete with those ants. You can't. These ants got together to raise money and buy a house and renovated it, and they sold it for 10,000 yuan. Houses in the Chinese area. This resource, I really can't compete with them. Then he gritted his teeth and entered the white area. He went to collect houses in white areas, starting with the simplest foreclosure. Some whites couldn't afford the debt, and their houses were seized. You can understand it. Starting with foreclosure, it's been 7 or 8 years. He may have described various scenes to me. We probably know that. If in Los Angeles, most white areas are not as good as Chinese areas. It's relatively messy, relatively poor and backward, and it's hard to get the house. There will be many troubles. For example, people living there won't leave. This is the simplest one. A little more complicated is this house. I finally drove the people out of it. After I took over this house, I was about to decorate. I found a family of homeless people living there. Haha, they won't leave. Almost every house I buy, I always encounter such troubles. He keeps penetrating into the surrounding communities, white communities, Mexican communities, and Indian communities. It involves many different ethnic communities. Truly, to deeply understand the living conditions of Americans. I think this friend has really integrated into America. He is completely integrated into American society. Investing in second-hand houses. I think it will be a new career. The picture gradually emerges. More and more Americans will find that. Chinese people's talents in business and image in business, this is not only helpful for Americans to know China. It will be very helpful, but also for the Chinese gradually entering the global business. But also good for the economy. Finally, I'll use a Chinese friend who has been working in Los Angeles. Interesting discovery of a Chinese friend to end this topic. He told me that he observed that it was strange that basically no Chinese people, after coming to America and finally settled down to work, they still do their jobs. They almost all changed careers. He used to do venture capital in China. Now he goes there. He runs a not small logistics company and owns a large number of trucks. He never dreamed of doing this, but he found that everyone around him was like this. They all changed their careers after going there and doing well in it. So I think Chinese people really have a new career, have a new career picture. I'm looking forward to it.
I was very good at math. That's a big Asian stereotype. They never let me use a calculator until I turned 15, so I can work on my brain function. That's an old school Chinese strategy. So when I was 14 years old, I stole my brother's calculator. I stole Roy Rogers' calculator, and I locked myself in my room and I started rebelling. I started doing math homework. Other kids were like around with like alcohol and drugs. I was up some parabolas, you know? Locked myself in a room. I was just punching in numbers. I was like, oh man, this feels great, you know? It's so wrong. It's awesome.